As a team of first year Professional Master of Education students, myself, Aisling, Leeanne, Liam and Fanny, we had the great challenge to research, analyse and understand what is intelligence and intelligent testing. Our aim for this podcast is to understand, analyse and illustrate what is intelligence, who are the main theorists in the field, how it is measured and why is it relevant for you and us as future teachers. Intelligence is a complex concept for anyone to define, so where to start? The Collins Dictionary defines intelligence as the capacity for understanding, ability to perceive and comprehend meaning. Or is it to do with knowledge? Or to do with imagination like Einstein said? The true sign of intelligence is not knowledge, but it's imagination. People have different concepts and understanding of what intelligence is. Here we will look at Donald Trump saying he is smart.
I went to the best school. I went to the Wharton School of Finance, Ivy League. I'm smart.
Doing well on tests and answering lots of questions in school.
Intelligence is the ability to make sense of the world, to reason.
Intelligence is not just what you learn in school, it's how you use what you know.
You see, we might all see intelligence in a different way depending on who we are. We will now look at theorists and what they discovered. For complex concepts, it is always good to look at what research has been conducted by whom and what are the big theories behind it. What we want to show you in our podcast is that the 20th century produced three major theories on intelligence. The first was proposed by Charles Spearman in 1904. Spearman acknowledged that there are different types of intelligence, but argued that they are all correlated. If people tend to do well on some sections of an IQ test, they tend to do well on all of them, and vice versa. So Spearman argued for a general intelligence factor called G, which remains controversial to this day. Decades later, Harvard psychologist Howard Gardner devised this notion with his theory of multiple intelligences, which set forth 8 distinct types of intelligence and claimed that there need be no correlation among them. A person could possess strong emotional intelligence without being gifted analytically. Later, in 1985, Robert Sternberg, the former dean of Tufts, put forward his triarchic theory of intelligence, which argued that previous definitions of intelligence are too narrow because they are based solely on intelligences that can be assessed in IQ tests. Instead, Sternberg believes types of intelligence are broken down into 3 subsets: analytic, creative, and practical. Howard Gardner initially formulated a list of 7 intelligences. His listing was provisional. The first 2 have been typically valued in schools, the next 3 are usually associated with the arts, and the final 2 are what Howard Gardner called personal intelligences: linguistic intelligence, logical and mathematical intelligence, musical, bodily kinesthetic, spatial, naturalist, interpersonal, and intrapersonal. Intelligences rarely operate independently. They are used at the same time and tend to complement each other as people develop skills or solve problems. The strengths associated with Gardner's theory is values more types of skills than traditional intelligence does, but doesn't limit the things that can be measured using paper and pencil tests. The weaknesses associated with Gardner's theory doesn't value things that aren't intelligence but are skills or talents. If things can't be measured like that, then are they intelligence? Is 7 too many? So, with that in mind, teachers should be aware of the more evidence-based triarchic theory by Sternberg. Sternberg agreed with Gardner in terms of seeing intelligence in a broader context. However, Sternberg divided his theory into 3 intelligences: analytical, creative, and practical. Analytical intelligence includes abstract thinking, logic, reasoning, and mathematical skills. Creative intelligence focuses on generating new ideas or thinking outside the box, and an ability to deal with new or unusual situations. Finally, practical intelligence centers on the ability to apply knowledge to the real world. This will commonly be referred to as street smarts. We will now look at intelligence testing. After looking at the theory, we will see why is it interesting to study intelligence, what is the impact for us as a teacher, and to look at pupils' abilities and how to let them be creative. First of all, what is intelligence testing? As stated in week 7 of our Understanding Learning module, intelligence testing is the attempt to quantify and measure individual differences in cognitive ability by way of standardized testing, which uses words, numbers, or figures. This is usually administered in written form. In this section, we will be looking at the contributions of Alfred Binet, Charles Spearman, and L.L. Thurstone to intelligence testing. The Stanford Binet intelligence scale was initially created by the French psychologist Alfred Binet. Later it was revised by Louis M. Thurman, a psychologist at Stanford University. Initially it was used for identifying children with learning difficulties in order to assign them to special education programs. It was only when Thurman revised this model that he used it to find children and adults who had above average levels of intelligence, while still using the test to identify children with learning difficulties. This new model of IQ, meaning intelligence quotient testing, grew in popularity. The general intelligence factor, more commonly known as the G factor, was originally proposed by Charles Spearman. He observed that a child's performance ratings across unrelated school subjects were positively correlated. Through that, he proposed that these correlations reflected the influence of an underlying general mental ability that entered performance through all types of mental tests. Spearman suggested that all mental performance could be rooted in one single general ability factor, which he labelled G. The most widely accepted contemporary theories of intelligence incorporate the G factor in some way. For example, the SAT exams in America are primarily a measure of G. However, critics of G have contended that an emphasis on G is misplaced and entails a devaluation of other important abilities. L.L. Thurstone opposed the notion of a singular general intelligence that factored into the scores of all psychometric tests. Instead, he believed there to be 7 key mental abilities: verbal comprehension, word fluency, number facility, spatial visualization, associative memory, perceptual speed and reasoning. Eventually, Thurstone arrived at 13 different factors as opposed to Spearman's 1 and called these primary mental abilities. Today, the Thurstone Mental Awareness Test is used mainly in industry to help measure an individual's ability to learn new skills quickly, adjust to new situations, understand complex or subtle relationships, and be flexible in thinking. The key consideration to take from this for teachers is that clearly the notion of intelligence being fixed and narrow and easily quantifiable in testing is not the case. In most instances, there are numerous critics regarding the numerous forms of teaching. It is essential for teachers to build and develop intelligence rather than just look at ways of testing to see the level a student is at with regards to the rest of the class. Teaching is part science and part art, and for that reason, the concept of multiple intelligences taps into the creative world that a teacher must go to in order to fully engage their students.